and welcome to Check Your Thread, the podcast that will help you sew more sustainably. My name's Zoe and I'm obsessed with sewing. I've been blogging about it for over 14 years and I'm the creator and host of the popular handmade wardrobe challenge Me Made May. But, and there's always a but, I've become increasingly concerned about the climate crisis and the way that my lifestyle contributes to it. So, in this podcast, I'll be nerding out about making clothes whilst exploring how to minimise the negative impact that it may have. I really hope you'll join me in this journey. The actions we take and the choices we make whilst engaging in sewing are full of social and political context. Today's episode explores the idea that sewing is political and why that's a good thing. But before we get into that, are you doing okay today? I'm feeling pretty exhausted after a really busy week last week. It was both my kids' birthdays and their celebrations over the past week. My mum came down to visit us, plus I went up to London for the knitting and stitching show in Alexandra Palace in London. But so I could take the time off, I really had to put the hours in the rest of the week, so there'd still be a podcast and a newsletter and a Free Pattern Friday blog post and all that. Speaking of the podcast, if you've heard them already, I really hope you enjoyed the last two episodes with my guest, improv quilt legend Heidi Parkes. I've had some lovely feedback from listeners. For example, I received a lovely message from Vanessa on Instagram saying, "Hearing Heidi talk about her work has added more dimension and another layer to my understanding of the art form. I'm definitely going to be listening to the last two episodes again. Thanks for taking the time to share your takeaways with myself and with Heidi. I really loved speaking with her and I absolutely hope to speak to Heidi again in the future." So what's on your sewing table at the moment? Are you making anything fun? For the last week or so, I've only been making zipped pouches. I've been testing a free sewing pattern for a future edition of my Free Pattern Friday blog post series, and it's been a really great pattern for using up some of my really precious fabric scraps, including some that have been in my stash for like over 10 years. I'm just finishing up my fourth pouch. I plan to keep one for myself because the pouch that I use for my makeup is a bit on the small side. And the other three are going to be gifts. I'll be popping them in the post so they can go off to their new homes. My sustainability win this week is probably that I went to the knitting and stitching show and didn't buy anything. I'm still on a buying ban because I'm participating in the challenge called Last Sew is Standing. I did think I'd buy some yarn, however, which is allowed because that's not sewing related, but there just wasn't anything that was quite the right colour and the right thickness, so I didn't get any yarn either. I did have a wonderful time there though. I met up with heaps of sewing people that I haven't seen for ages, plus I got to meet people in real life that I've only previously known through Instagram or blogs or email. I did do a load of recording as well, so expect an episode on that very soon. Right, so my sustainability fail this week. My son has started sucking and chewing his clothes. He definitely doesn't realise he's doing it, but over the last week he's wrecked 2 school tops that are now too far gone to mend. I've allocated a few fabric hankies that I've made for him to either chew or suck on when he feels the need. And when I do spot him chewing his clothes, sometimes I'm able to shove one of the hankies at him instead. But obviously I'm not always there when he's doing it. To be honest, I don't mind too much if some of his garments look a little ratty. Although if they're ones that I've made him and they've got holes in, that is inducing a fair bit of frustration. But what is really annoying in terms of sustainability is that the clothes that he makes holes in, I can no longer pass to other kids when he grows out of them. So they're not going to have another life apart from if I make them into rags. If anyone has any ideas on how I can encourage him away from this new habit, please do share. It's been a great week for podcast support, I'm happy to report. Massive thanks to new patrons Lindsay, Danielle and Mel. Also, big thanks to existing patrons Lisa and Ursula for upping the amount of their monthly support. So generous, all of you. If this podcast is helping you on your journey to sew and live more sustainably, please consider offering a small amount of monthly support so I can keep it going. There's a link to sign up to the Check Your Thread Patreon in the show notes, in your podcast app, and on the website checkyourthread.com. Okay, today's episode. Sometimes I bring you an episode that is super practical and full of tips on how to sew more sustainably. Sometimes I bring you conversations with guests who often share their interesting and inspiring perspectives. And occasionally I try to provide an overview about why all this stuff is so damn important and how it connects to a far broader picture. And today's episode is unapologetically the latter type. Thanks as always for giving this your ears. If it means anything to you, please share it with your sewing buddies or on social media. Until next week, please take care of yourself and enjoy. Nothing we do exists in a vacuum. Every choice we make, every action we take, every amount of money we spend has some kind of knock-on effect. And that is a good thing. It means we all, to a greater or lesser degree, can exercise some power and influence over the kind of world we're living in. How wonderful is that? So why am I making this episode now? Well, I received an email from a listener in response to episode 103, which was a chatty conversation with my friend Meg Grandstaff. The subject line of the email was, "More sewing, no politics." And although I don't think it was the author's intention, that email has actually really helped me drill down on why I'm doing what I do and why I feel it's important. So I won't quote from the email directly because I've not requested permission to do so, but I feel I have the right to refer to its contents. In essence, the listener was appalled that the episode included discussions of the governmental policies and political trends in the US and the UK. The listener wishes to not have the sewing-related content that they consume sullied by political chat. In all honesty, my first response was confusion. I thought, oh, but everything I do is political. I mean, it's literally baked into this podcast, and I thought that was clear. I made an episode about the Check Your Thread manifesto after all. My main concern was, if this dimension of my work hasn't been clear, maybe I haven't been doing my job very well in recent months. But after some more thought, I realised that the author of the email and I probably have different definitions of political, among probably a number of other fundamental differences, I'm guessing as well. But I'm guessing that the emailer is taking the more literal definition of political to mean related to the government and its activities. And while obviously this is accurate, I also take a broader view of what political means to include the study of power structures beyond national governments. To me, the term politics includes various systems of power and how they impact individuals, society and the planet. After all, the personal is the political, isn't it? I've often quoted that phrase, but to be honest, I've never known its origin or the original intended meaning. So I looked it up. Well, turns out the personal is political is most widely known as a political slogan expressing a common belief among feminists. The belief being that the personal experiences of women are rooted in their political situation and gender inequality. Although the origin of the phrase "the personal is political" is uncertain, it became popular following the publication in 1970 of an essay of the same name by American feminist Carol Hanisch. Hanisch argued that many personal experiences, particularly those of women, can be traced to one's location within a system of power relationships. Yet, Hanisch was not the first to suggest that personal experiences are the result of social structures or inequality. I'm quoting this from the Britannia website, which I'll link in the show notes because it's really interesting. So, in 1959, American sociologist C. Wright Mills published The Sociological Imagination. And in that, he argued that individual experiences are inextricably connected with the greater social and historical context. For example, if an individual is unemployed, then that unemployment may be related to larger patterns of unemployment in that society. So, if social pressures and systems of power can influence individuals, then surely it can be flipped the other way around. Through conscious thought and individual or group action, we can influence social norms and systems of power, no? I mean, hasn't that literally been the root of all change? Through conscious individual and group pressure through action. Anyways, how we choose to clothe ourselves has always been an intrinsically social and political act. It also extends to how we choose to spend our time and how we choose to spend our money. We do not live in a vacuum, as I said, and every choice we make is connected to the people around us and to the physical world. The author of that email emphasised that they believe that taking care of where we live is not political, but I fundamentally disagree. The climate crisis is being ignored by governments and corporations because economic growth is always more important than fixing the system. Making green activism all about personal actions ignores the systemic changes that also need to be made. And we need to acknowledge global inequality in any large-scale solution, which is to say, politics. I would also go as far as to say that it's incredibly dangerous to not consider ourselves or our actions to be connected to systems of power. I know that there are plenty of people that choose to look the other way when worrying and potentially damaging political trends are developing, simply because it doesn't directly affect them. They have the luxury of looking away, so they do, which reads as apathy. And that's how a lot of scary and damaging laws get pushed through, even if the majority of people aren't truly behind them, which, ironically, is one of the points that Meg and I were making. What I really loved about my conversation with Meg, as I know did a number of others because I received some lovely feedback, was that it was a genuine conversation between friends. And when you're talking with your friends, you naturally flip between topics, like, what's the weather been like? How's your job going? Like, how's your family? Something you've been following in the news that's angering you. Something cool you discovered. How your creative projects are going. Something tasty you recently cooked. And so on. That's what life is made up of. Anyway, unfortunately, sewing directly intersects with 3 of the 5 most environmentally destructive industries. Fashion, which includes fibre production. Transportation, which includes the shipping of goods around the globe. And the fossil fuel industry, which is obviously connected to the other 2. All these industries, in their current state, are being held up by various forms of governmental support, whether that's the government's refusal to impose rules on certain type of fibre production, or the issuing or renewal of licences to mine for fossil fuels, or a refusal to impose taxes on some of the more damaging methods of transporting goods around the globe. So whether we like it or not, sewing really is inextricably linked to politics and systems of power. Depressing? Yes, but also potentially empowering. As individuals and as a collective, we have agency. With everything that we do, we have the power to plant seeds and to disrupt damaging systems. Even with how we choose to deal with our fabric scraps. In fact, I would argue every topic that we cover in this podcast has a political dimension to it. Take mending and repairs, for example. Okay, so we are living in a period of history when a new t-shirt can be bought for less than the cost of a sandwich. So when we choose to mend a garment rather than chuck it in the bin, we are actively choosing to disrupt the toxic cycle of overconsumption and waste. And we are avoiding contributing to the mountains of discarded textiles that are being shipped to the global south. And when we choose to buy organic fabrics and fibres, and we investigate natural dyeing methods, we are voting for the reduction of poisonous chemicals polluting our soils and waterways. And when we are choosing fabric made from natural or regenerated fibres, we are avoiding adding to the problem of microplastics in our oceans and in the sea life and in our own bodies. And when we take on the challenge of using up our scraps or avoiding scraps by trying out zero-waste sewing patterns, we are saying that we don't want to contribute to the issues related to landfills. And of course, it's not just sewing. We get to make thoughtful and purposeful decisions within every aspect of our lives, each one with the potential to contribute towards change. The businesses we choose to give our money to is a vote for the values that they embody and enact. The products that we choose to spend our money on is a vote for how we want natural resources to be used in the world. And of course, the vote we cast in a ballot box is also a very important vote. And talking about our decisions and our options spreads the consciousness of our agency, which, of course, is what I'm trying to do with this podcast. But we don't have to try to do it all. We really don't. We are under no obligation to try to change everything all at once. I mean, we're all busy, and there is only so much that we can do as individuals. But we should probably do something. Otherwise, we're effectively voting for things to stay the same. We each just need to pick something that matters to us, do a bit of research about the various options and their impacts, and adjust our actions accordingly. Once we've made that change, we can amplify the impact of it by talking about it, like ripple effects and all that. Then, if we feel so inclined, we can pick another thing that matters to us, rinse and repeat. But I get it. Social injustice, climate change. So much of the stuff reported on in the news is super scary and depressing, and sometimes you just need to switch off and do your thing for a bit, which is completely valid. Occasionally, I like to stick on some music or a comedy podcast during those times. But for the rest of the time, I believe that there is a way for us to engage in our passion that is both joyful and empowering at the same time. And that's the balance that I try to strike with Check Your Thread. So, if you like your sewing content presented to you entirely devoid of social or political context, then this probably isn't the podcast for you. I am deeply committed to talking about sewing within a broader scope. I'm in the business of trying to make change, gentle and joyful change. To borrow a phrase from my friend Saskia, I'm trying to push the needle towards a more socially just and environmentally conscious world through the lens of sewing. My mission is to help make a world where the impact of the environment is factored into every decision made within our making lives and beyond. This is my sphere of influence, and it can also be yours. So what do you think? This is a massive subject, of course, but it's one that I think that we need to chip away at and explore as a community. So if you have any points to make, you know I would love to hear them. If I get enough, maybe it can form the basis of more episodes. So don't be shy. Please email me, zoe@checkyourthread.com. Thanks so much for listening. I really hope you enjoyed this episode and are left feeling inspired. For more info about the podcast, including show notes for this and every episode, head to checkyourthread.com. I'd love to hear from you, so if you have any comments, questions or ideas for future episodes, please get in touch by emailing zoe@checkyourthread.com or find me on Instagram @checkyourthread. Massive thanks to Patrick Potter for production support, to Sylvia Seller for the awesome logo design, and to Simon at Palm Skin Productions for the music. This ad-free podcast would not be possible without listener support, so if you feel you are able, please consider signing up to the Check Your Thread Patreon. For the equivalent of buying me a coffee each month, you'll be making it possible to continue producing regular episodes. Links can be found in the show notes and on the website checkyourthread.com. I hope you'll listen again next week. Until then, take care. Bye!